And when he had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God, and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And white robes were given unto every one of them, and it was said unto them, that they should rest yet for a little season, and tell their fellow servants also, and their brethren, that should be killed as they were, should be fulfilled. Revelation chapter 6, 9 through 11 is what really got me looking at the altar, specifically the altar of burning incense, which that was different than the altar that we all think about, where they give the burnt offering or the offerings of the food items, kind of a forgiveness of their sins. But specifically, the one shown before the throne of God is a lot different. It is similar to the altar that burns incense. Now, the most common thought process to this is that this incense burning night and day that was lit in the morning and the evening is to be continual, was showing the prayers of the saints going up to God. Because inside that temple there was the Holy of Holies, then a veil, then that altar of incense, and that smoke would rise and it would actually go up and it would go into the Holy of Holies, but once a year it would have to be consecrated. And with that, the high priest would go in with the blood of a sacrifice, actually two sacrifices. One was a goat and one was a bullock, which is a bull, and they'd sprinkle blood not only on the mercy seat on the Ark of the Covenant, but also on the horns that came off this altar of incense. Now, they did the same thing to the altar on the outside that was given for sacrifices, but all of this had to be done once a year to keep it holy, because sin prevailed in not just humanity, but even the Israelites. Out of the 364 verses in the Bible that talk about an altar, very few of them talk about the altar that burns the incense. But why I think it's important to us nowadays is because that burnt offering, that sacrifice altar, is no longer needed, because Jesus fulfilled that law. That old law told them what to sacrifice at what times, for what types of sin. And of course, Jesus, he got rid of that because he fulfilled the need for that. The Hebrew priests would have to make those daily sacrifices for the sins, but also once a year the high priest would take sacrificial blood and he would sprinkle it on the altars, the one outside and the one inside, and also the mercy seat. Well, now that Jesus, he died, he was the final sacrifice, he is now our high priest, that veil was torn, it was rent in two, and so now that separation didn't have to be there, because he not only was a sacrifice, but he's also the high priest. And that gives us direct connection with our prayers to God. So Jesus, being the high priest, he now intercedes on our behalf. Just like we intercede on behalf of others, we send our prayers up to the Father. Jesus is there. Now, a fun question is, did Jesus sprinkle his own blood on that incense burning altar on the four horns before the Father in his temple? Kind of fun to think about. Was it necessary? Is it necessary? I don't know, but since he is the high priest and that's what the high priest did, it could be symbolic, but at the same time done down here to keep it holy because of sin. In heaven there is no sin, so would Jesus need to sanctify that altar? Probably not, but just a thought, throwing it out there for good times. Revelation 8:3, and another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer. And a censer is It's the metal piece that it heats up and it burns the incense. Kind of like if you have a Scentsy, or you know what Scentsy is. It's the same type of thing, that that wax fluid heats up under the lamp or above the lamp, and then it fills your house with the sweet smell or that good smell. And carry on. And there was given unto him much incense. So this angel has a bunch of incense. He has his golden censer, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which is before the throne. So this angel is combining incense with the prayers that are on the altar. And the smoke of the incense, which came with the prayers of the saints, ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar, and cast it into the earth, and there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and earthquakes. Although difficult to pinpoint the total use of this altar before God, we can see that it has to do with prayer. In some form, prayers of us, of the saints, combine with the incense and the smoke that goes, and God smells it and he hears the prayers. Now, in the instance of Revelation 8, that has to do with the judgment, because after all those prayers are heard, the angel fills his censer with the fire and throws it to the earth. So I'm not going to say that's the case for all prayers, but in this era, this time, when there's a lot of God's people being killed, that a sort of retribution comes down. I think it's cool too, because in Revelation 14:18, and another angel came out from the altar, which had power over the fire, and cried with a loud cry to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, Thrust thy sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And again, this is a type of judgment going on, but there's an angel coming from the altar. And this says, come out from the altar. So again, it's more still a mystery as to what is going on fully with this altar before God. We can see a small piece of it that has to do with prayer, but again, there's a lot there we don't understand. And this is just a exploratory video or talk about the similarity between the altar before God's throne and the altar as it was pre-Jesus. Looking back at Revelation 5, verse 8 specifically, and when he had taken the book, the 4 beasts and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials full of odors, which are the prayer of the saints. A common thought process because of these verses from Revelation 5 and Revelation 8 is that prayers fill up these bowls, and they're given up to God, and then God pours out according to those prayers. Now, specifically here, it's talking about judgment on the earth. Is that the case for blessings too? Not sure. It doesn't go into detail about that, but we do know God pours out blessings. But we also know that God is slow to anger. So if God's acting on a righteous anger and pouring out his wrath, it might be that it's set differently to where these bowls of wrath kind of have to fill up before they're poured out, and bad things are brought to the wicked. On another note, the altar holds these coals of fire, and in Isaiah 6 he sees this vision, and then in verse 5 he says, Then said I, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For mine eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Then flew one of the seraphims unto me, having a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with the tongs from off the altar. And he laid it upon my mouth, and said, Lo, this has touched thy lips, and thine iniquity is taken away, and thy sin purged. So it seems the coals burning in this altar are a purifying type of fire. And here, even though it's probably in a spiritual sense, but also a type of physical sense, that Isaiah saw this vision of heaven and he realized, hey, like, I'm unclean, my mouth is unclean, I'm around unclean people. And then God's showing him, like, okay, I'm going to purify you, I'm going to take this away from you. And that's just another separate thought. I have many more questions. One is, okay, is there always this incense burning before God? What is exactly, the point of it? Is it just like, you like your house to smell good? Is this specifically the main reason? But also because it's God, it's the glory of God, and that burning flame purifies. It somehow, maybe this is just a thought, maybe prayers that come up and that are kind of burned with the incense, the pure prayers are the ones that survive, and they're mixed with the incense, and those are the prayers that go before God. I don't know. Again, this is all just exploratory review, but I think it's kind of neat to look at. And on another side note, I think it's funny because, the enemy always tries to forfeit God. He tries to take what was there seen in heaven and kind of use it towards his own devices. Tries to make himself kind of equal to God, because you see all kind of pagan religions where they have altars, they have their sacrifices, they sacrifice kids or babies or just people. There's also temples. There's especially the Eastern types of temples. They burn incense before their fake gods, and it's just funny to me to see how the devil tries to make that equal. Like, hey, we saw this in heaven, so let's kind of take it and do it for ourselves. Let them worship us, kind of like how God's throne room is. But that's about all I got. If you have any thoughts on this, maybe this opened up a door you can go look at, and maybe you can reveal something. Look at something, see that I didn't see. All I know is that, all these kind of great mysteries of God, that'll be fun to learn about when we finally get to reign with Jesus, and learn all these inner workings. And who knows, we might not learn everything, and probably not even right away, but it's good stuff all around. Alright, well, thanks for listening, joining me. As always, like, share, subscribe, comment, and hey, bless you, and keep up your fruitful endeavors in looking in the Word, and just encourage you to come closer to God and have the Spirit guide you, and learning about the truth, because this is Fighting Truths TV on Channel 33.